Thanks for speeding here today in your F-Zero machine as we take a look at a truly beloved Nintendo franchise that has been around since the early 90s. While the franchise may not have had a proper new entry for quite some time, F-Zero still has dedicated fans who are longing for a new release. Well, until then, we have the original game and its sequels to have fun with, and today we are looking at where the series began. Let's look at how this game came to be and why it is such an important title for Nintendo. Once again, thanks for being here with us today. We have plenty more great walks down video game history lane for you to check out, and we have some exciting new videos in development that look at more iconic games from gaming's past. Be sure to subscribe so you do not miss out on our next video. From the mid to late 80s, Nintendo was the undisputed king of video games. Sure, there were other consoles, home computers, and the arcade scene was in its heyday. However, when it came to the home console market, Nintendo was sitting on top of the throne in many parts of the world. As the 80s progressed, Nintendo started to notice that its massive market share was starting to shrink. While the TurboGrafx-16 may not have been a huge hit in the USA, in Japan, where it was called the PC Engine, it was doing very well and was a popular system. However, it was Sega and their 16-bit Sega Mega Drive, which would be called the Sega Genesis in the USA, that really took it to Nintendo. Nintendo knew that the aging NES hardware simply could not cut it when put next to the PC Engine and the Genesis, so they got to work on their next system, and as we all know, this next system would be the 16-bit powerhouse that is the Super Nintendo. Just because you have the best hardware does not mean that your system will be a success. The rather modestly powered Nintendo Game Boy destroyed the technically more impressive Sega Game Gear and Atari Lynx because it had much better games. Nintendo knew better than anyone that it was games that made the system, and they knew that they had to have something special right out of the gate for their new system, and that game was Super Mario World. Okay, so clearly Super Mario World was the main game that launched with the Super Nintendo, but Nintendo wanted another game that would really show the power of their new system and the fancy tricks that it could do. They wanted a game that would show gamers and the parents of younger gamers that this new Nintendo could do things that their old one and the competition could dream of, and that game was F-Zero. The development of F-Zero was handled by Nintendo Entertainment Analysis and Development, or as they are better known, Nintendo EAD. Although back in the 80s and 90s, they were better known as Nintendo Research and Development No. 4 Department, or Nintendo R&D 4 if you prefer. Nintendo EAD wanted to make a few showcase titles for the launch of the Super Nintendo. People would expect a Mario game at launch, and that was taken care of with what is one of the greatest Mario games of all time. But they needed something with a real wow factor, and that came in a 1-2 punch, which was Pilot Wings and F-Zero. Two games that were, of course, made with being a fun game in mind, but they were also developed to show off what the Super Nintendo could do. Nintendo legend Shigeru Miyamoto would serve as the producer for the game, with Kazunobu Shimizu being the lead director of this new Nintendo IP. Yasunari Nishida would serve as the lead programmer, and Takayama Imamura was the artist, although Shimizu did work on the art as well. Actually, Imamura has gone on record stating that he had a great deal of freedom when it came to creating the art for F-Zero, which was pretty surprising as this was his first game. Of course, you cannot talk about F-Zero without talking about the music, and the music was composed by Yumiko Kanki and Naoto Ishida. While this was the lead team behind the game, other people did pitch in. It has been said that there were around 9 people who were responsible for the creation of F-Zero, from concept to the cartridge slamming into the Super Nintendo. By all accounts, F-Zero was always intended to be a launch title in all regions, but there was no real crunch here. The development of the game, even with the new hardware, was something that happened at a solid pace without any major issues. This ensured that the game would be ready for the launch of the Super Nintendo. What do you think was the most impressive showcase of the Super Nintendo's power? Pilot Wings or F-Zero? Be sure to let us know in the comments section down below. Now you are playing with superpower. The most important part of any video game is how it plays, and F-Zero is a very fun game to actually play. However, we have to first talk about the visuals and the sound of F-Zero, as this truly is a showcase title for the Super Nintendo. The futuristic setting let Nintendo get very creative with their track designs and locations, such as Mute City and Big Blue, which are iconic and now a huge part of Nintendo's history. There is no way that the NES could have visuals anywhere near as close to what F-Zero offered, and frankly, it blew away anything that the Sega Genesis and the PC Engine had to offer in 1990 as well. F-Zero looked amazing, but the game moved at a blistering pace too. The sense of speed that you feel when you play F-Zero was unlike any other racing game that we had played at home before, and that is because of one of the biggest weapons that the Super Nintendo had, and that is Mode 7. With Mode 7, the Super Nintendo was able to display what at the time felt like full 3D visuals and produce them at a fast rate. There is no point in a game looking great if it moves at a snail's pace, but thanks to the hardware the Super Nintendo offered, as well as the talented programmers squeezing out all that they could at the time, F-Zero looks and moves amazingly well. There was nothing like this that you could play at home in 1990. It may sound crazy to a younger gamer, but truly, when it came to racing games and perhaps home console games in general, there was nothing that looked like F-Zero when the game was released. While the game looks amazing, F-Zero has an epic soundtrack. To say that Yumiko Kanki and Naoto Ishida did a great job is a massive understatement. The themes from Mute City and Big Blue are iconic Nintendo songs now, and anyone who grew up in the Super Nintendo era will remember them. Much like Nintendo will reuse certain songs for other franchises like Super Mario, Mario Kart, and The Legend of Zelda, to name a few, later games in the F-Zero franchise would have their own versions of the iconic songs that started all the way back with the first release. As well as having some truly awesome music in the game, F-Zero actually has great sound design in general. The sounds of the F-Zero machines make them sound fast, and the crashes and other sounds help add to the tension of the races. If you were lucky enough to have your Super Nintendo hooked up to a stereo, this would have blown your mind with how great it sounded. What is your favorite song from the original F-Zero? Or what song do you feel is most iconic and associated with the series? When it comes to the gameplay of F-Zero, on the surface it does actually seem like a pretty simple racing game. You pick from one of 4 racers, Captain Falcon, Pico, Dr. Stewart, and Samurai Gora. Each racer has their own F-Zero machine hover car, and as you would expect, each one has its own strengths and weaknesses. Despite there only being 4 machines to pick from, Nintendo did a fantastic job when it came to making sure that each of the 4 machines felt different to drive. Once you have picked your F-Zero racer, you can then select from one of 3 cups, or as the game refers to them, leagues. These are the Knight League, the Queen League, and the King League, with each one offering an increased challenge. In addition to the 3 leagues getting progressively harder, you can also select from one of 4 difficulty settings for each league as well. F-Zero's leagues are made up of 5 tracks each. Each track will require you to complete 5 laps, and what makes F-Zero different from other racing games is that there is a progression system in each race. Yes, you want to finish in first place, but each race forces you to be on your best lap as racers are knocked out if they are too far behind. If you want a modern comparison, think of the Knockout Tour mode in Mario Kart World for the Nintendo Switch 2, where racers are eliminated if they fall below a certain position at the end of a lap. The racing action in F-Zero feels fantastic. The controls are simple but nice and tight. The L and R buttons let you groove around corners. It is not quite like jumping and power sliding in Super Mario Kart. It is a little more fine-tuned and specific than that. Skilled racers will be able to use the shoulder buttons to skim corners super close to the barriers. Speaking of which, F-Zero's tracks are often high above the ground, meaning that they need an electrified barrier to help keep the racers on the track. If you crash into this barrier, you will lose speed, but you will also take damage. If your power meter, which is located in the top right of the screen, fully depletes, you will blow up in a fiery explosion and you are out of that race. Thankfully, F-Zero is a very fair game, and usually, at the start of a lap, there is a section of the track you can drive through which will give you back some power, which you may desperately need as you get to the 5th and final lap. Another way that you can get a boost is that you will earn a Super Jet Turbo for each lap you complete. You can have 3 of these stored at once, and while they give you a burst of speed, skilled players will learn the most optimal time to make use of their Super Jet Turbo on each track. F-Zero also offers a high score system. Sure, getting high scores for each of the tracks is fun, but this also ties into the gameplay. Players will earn an extra machine when they reach a certain score on each track, and this will let them retry a course that they have either not finished in the first place, or, even worse, blown up on. While there are no weapons at play in F-Zero, each track offers many dangers. There are other racers to contend with, some of whom will straight up try to crash into you. There are electrified sides of the courses, which we have already discussed, but several of the tracks offer you jumps that can give you a shortcut and a burst of speed, but leaving the track is very dangerous as you can blow up instantly if you fail to land back on the track. There are also speed boosts that can be found on the track too. Getting a burst of speed is awesome. However, you have to be smart, as it can be easy to plow into the side of a track or another racer. While the gameplay of F-Zero is a lot of fun and a real credit to the team behind the game, there is not a ton of content in the original F-Zero. Due to wanting the game to look fantastic and move at blistering speed, they were not able to offer two-player split-screen racing, meaning this is single-player only. Sure, it's fun to try to beat your friends and family members' times in the time trial mode, but not being able to race them head-to-head is rather disappointing. There is also nothing to unlock in F-Zero. What you have when you fire up the game is pretty much it. Still, despite this, F-Zero is still regarded as an absolute classic, mainly due to the fantastic gameplay and the wonderful story and characters that were created for this game. One of the things that Nintendo perhaps does not get enough credit for when it comes to F-Zero is the insane amount of lore that was built around the futuristic racing sport. Nintendo went all in on this, and it is very impressive and super cool if you like sci-fi, racing, and superheroes, as F-Zero features elements of all three. The game takes place in the year 2560. Mankind has long reached the stars, and thanks to the interaction with many different alien races, humanity and the other races that live out in the stars came up with the idea of a new and exciting Grand Prix series that would feature the best racers from all over the galaxy. The original F-Zero offered 4 racers. Dr. Robert Stewart is from Mute City and is the pilot of the Golden Fox. His father, the late Kevin Stewart, designed the Golden Fox to be lightweight and offer extreme acceleration. After his passing, Robert became the pilot. Despite being a well-respected doctor, he is one of the best pilots around and has a real need for speed. Pico hails from the Deathwind and is part of the Polypoto tribe, and his Wild Goose machine is designed to be strong and able to take a beating as well as drive aggressively. Pico is as cold as ice, and this former soldier turned F-Zero racer is rumored to also work as a professional hitman. Next up we have Samurai Goro, if that is his real name. It is speculated that this man is the leader of a gang of thieves and that they operate out of Red Canyon. He is the pilot of the Fire Stingray, which may have slow acceleration, but this is the fastest racer in the F-Zero League. It is also heavily rumored that Samurai Goro and his crew stole it. Last, but by no means least, we have the star and the main character associated with the F-Zero series, Captain Falcon. Captain Falcon is the pilot of the Blue Falcon, and he is a real hero. While he has a bit of a mysterious past, he is known to be a bounty hunter looking to capture bad guys, while he is not taking part in F-Zero races, of course. The instruction for F-Zero is truly a work of art. It features fantastic hand-drawn artwork of the racers and their F-Zero machines. However, it also includes biographies for each of the racers and the machines they drive, as well as background information about each of the key areas where the races take place, such as Mute City, Port Town, White Land, and more. Each of the locations has its own backstory, and it makes for a very interesting read. Speaking of which, the manual also features a fun 6-page comic book that tells the story of Captain Falcon trying to take down Samurai Goro, as well as make it in time for the first F-Zero race. Boasting fantastic artwork and fun writing, this is great stuff indeed. Nintendo truly went above and beyond to create a collection of interesting characters and an exciting and very diverse world for them to live and race in. Be sure to speed to the comments section and let us know who your favorite character in F-Zero is, and also let us know if you were mind blown that there was a comic book at the back of the instruction manual. F-Zero was a Super Nintendo launch title in all major regions when the Super Nintendo was released in Japan in 1990, the USA in 1991, and then in Europe in 1992. It was a must-own game for the system and one of the key titles that showed just how much more powerful this new console from Nintendo was. F-Zero was very favorably reviewed, with video game magazines being blown away by the visuals, music, and speed that the game had to offer. It was a very popular game, with the only major negatives people had about it being the lack of a two-player mode. In the modern day, F-Zero is often listed in many of the best Super Nintendo games articles and videos. The game sold very well. Granted, the Super Nintendo would only launch with a handful of games, but F-Zero remained a consistent seller throughout the system's life, shifting over 2.8 million copies by the time the Super Nintendo came to the end of its life. In 1994, Nintendo would re-release F-Zero as part of their budget-priced Nintendo's Player's Choice line, giving those coming into the Super Nintendo a little later a chance to buy the game brand new. These days, F-Zero is one of the most affordable Super Nintendo games. A loose copy, according to price charting at the time of making this video, is around $15. A complete copy is listed at $72. The Player's Choice version is roughly the same as far as the loose cartridge goes, but a complete in-box copy is listed at right around the $50 mark. F-Zero has been one of those games that has been consistently easy for people to add to their collections. Best of all, this is actually a fantastic game, so it is one that you will want to actually play and not just be a part of a game that is on your shelf. F-Zero has been re-released many times by Nintendo over the years. It was made available for the Nintendo eShop on the Nintendo Wii, Wii U, and 3DS. It was one of the 20 titles picked for the mini-console, the Super Nintendo Classic Edition, and it was one of the first titles to be included in the Nintendo Switch Online Super Nintendo Games Collection. With F-Zero being such a huge hit, you would have thought that Nintendo would fast-track a sequel, but that was not the case at all. The Super Nintendo would see some more F-Zero action, but only in Japan. In 1996 and 1997, BS F-Zero Grand Prix and BS F-Zero Grand Prix 2 would be released for Nintendo's Satellaview attachment, which allowed Japanese gamers to download games via an online service. This first release offered a new track and 4 new racers. The second Grand Prix game would offer a whole new league for racers to compete in. If players were to play at a specific time, they could even get some audio commentary. Most of this has been lost to time, but you can get a repro cart that features the BS F-Zero Grand Prix content, and these have been very popular. It would take 8 years after the original game was released to get a full sequel with F-Zero X for the Nintendo 64 in 1998, which would then get what is one of the most sought-after releases for the less-than-successful Nintendo 64 DD add-on, the groundbreaking F-Zero X expansion kit, which was released in 2000. It would be Sega who would handle the next F-Zero game, and there were many who consider this to be the greatest entry in the series. Released in 2004 for the Nintendo GameCube as F-Zero GX, there would also be a spectacular arcade release known as F-Zero AX that had an incredible arcade cabinet that in many ways was a throwback to the days when Sega would make these massive elaborate arcade machines for the likes of Outrun, Space Harrier, and Afterburner, where you had to actually sit in the cabinet. A unique feature was that players could take their GameCube memory cards and plug them into the arcade, although this was not the best thing to do, as many people reported that the memory card slots in the arcade machine would be dirty and even filled with chewing gum. While F-Zero GX would serve as the last home console F-Zero game, meaning that there was no F-Zero for the Nintendo Wii, Wii U, or Nintendo Switch, the Game Boy Advance would get 2 titles in the series. F-Zero GP Legend would be released in Japan in 2003 and the USA in 2004, and was based on the anime series. Japan would get another game in the series, F-Zero Climax, in 2004, and this, for the better part of 2 decades, was the last game released in the F-Zero series. Nintendo would make an online game called F-Zero 99, which featured a visual style similar to the Super Nintendo original. This was released as part of the Nintendo Switch Online service, and it was made available in 2023. This is a Battle Royale-style game where players compete to see who can be the last racer standing. Many fans had a great time with this, and it generally received very positive reviews. However, it did make many people wonder why Nintendo still refuses to make a whole new F-Zero game. In 2026, Nintendo added Virtua Boy games to its Nintendo Switch 2 online service. Gamers could buy a replica Virtua Boy that their Switch 2 could plug into. One of the major titles that Nintendo has said is coming to the service is Zero Racers. Zero Racers was the Virtual Boy game that, by all accounts, was pretty much finished and intended to be released for the Nintendo Virtual Boy, but when that console flopped, the decision was made to lock the game away, but now gamers will have the chance to try it out. While Nintendo has been rather stingy as far as actually making F-Zero games goes, the franchise has been celebrated by them for many years. Well, perhaps it is more fitting to say that Captain Falcon specifically has, but F-Zero fans will take what they can get at this point. Captain Falcon has been a mainstay in the Super Smash Bros. Series since the original game. In addition to Captain Falcon being one of the main characters in that series, F-Zero trophies, assists, and even stages have been included in Super Smash Bros. Over the years. Mario Kart has also seen some F-Zero dust sprinkled on top of it. In Mario Kart Wii, if you play as one of the lighter characters, you can race in the Blue Falcon. Mario Kart 8 would take this a step further thanks to the DLC by offering players the chance to race on tracks set in Mute City and Big Blue. In addition to this, all racers could now drive the Blue Falcon. Despite adding Link, the Inklings from Splatoon, and Animal Crossing characters to Mario Kart 8, Captain Falcon was not included. However, if you have the Captain Falcon amiibo from Super Smash Bros., using this in Mario Kart 8 will allow you to dress your Mii character up in his costume. That same amiibo can also be used in the awesome game Super Mario Maker to allow you to use a Captain Falcon costume as a power-up. The Wii U would get some more F-Zero love thanks to the launch title Nintendo Land. One of the mini-games included here was Captain Falcon's Twister Race. Also on the Wii U, that specific version of Tekken Tag Tournament 2 allowed certain fighters to dress up in a Captain Falcon costume. Thank you very much for spending some time with us today looking at one of the best franchises Nintendo has to offer, F-Zero. We are just like you and wish that Nintendo would show this series some more love, but there is no denying that the original F-Zero game is a truly groundbreaking title that many gamers hold in very high regard. Thanks again, and if you love classic and iconic video games, be sure to check out our other videos and subscribe as we have some more great games to talk about in future videos. Until then, Falcon punch your way to victory in whatever game you're playing next.